Let's talk a little bit about one of the scandals facing the administration, and they've got plenty of them. Eric Holder in the hot seat. We told you on Friday that apparently Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, he himself did sign off on the Rosen, on investigating James Rosen and getting his email, personal email, and looking at phone detail for many of the calls that he made. But what's interesting is 4 days before the James Rosen story hit the fan, he was asked, Eric Holder was, on Capitol Hill about the Associated Press. And it sounds like what he's talking about, it sounds like he's actually misleading the public. Here's Eric Holder.
With regard to the potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, that is not something that I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be a wise policy. In fact, my view is quite the opposite.
Not something I've ever been involved in. That's what he said 4 days before the Rosen thing became public. But what we do know, according to Department of Justice people, he was involved. The good news is the fact that the Attorney General will be investigating what's going on. So Eric Holder will be investigating Eric Holder. That's just crazy.
I don't know if that's going to stand.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Nobody's ever responsible for anything. Eric Holder's not responsible for the Justice Department. The president's not responsible for his administration.
I saw it on TV.
That's the most aggravating thing, and everything you're trying to teach people to do in life is take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for the people that you hire and have and are in charge.
Barbara out of Crossville, Tennessee, writes the following. She asks, what are the consequences to any upcoming potential perjury charges and the existing contempt of Congress charge against Eric Holder from the Fast and Furious debacle? Now, there are two aspects to that question. One is in regard to AP and James Rosen. The other is Fast and Furious. How would you answer that question, Jay?
Well, on Fast and Furious, the problem is, although the Attorney General was held in contempt, it's going to take the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia to actually enforce that. And he's not going to do it. It's a political appointee. He's not going to do it. The perjury count, or a potential perjury charge, is a very different scenario, because what you've got is a situation. Now, the Department of Justice is already trying to draw a distinction, saying, well, we weren't going to prosecute James Rosen. But if you look at the affidavits that were signed by and authorized by the Attorney General, they not only said that James Rosen violated the law and committed a criminal act and was a co-conspirator, that he was also a flight risk. Well, if you weren't going to actually go after him, why would you start talking about a flight risk? And that's because it took 3 judges to finally get the warrants issued. So I think the perjury charge, if there is in fact a perjury count here, could be very, very serious. Now, I think they're going to defend it aggressively. The Department of Justice, they're going to come up with a nuanced approach to this. But the reality is the Attorney General Holder needs to go. He needs to resign. This is not leadership. This is not, when you're an Attorney General, you have to be an attorney and a general. You've got to run the department. You've got to have a sense of confidence. And I think the American people, the confidence level in the Attorney General right now is at an all-time low, and it just gets worse. And you're already hearing rumblings from the White House.
You have to have a president who would accept that resignation, too. Jay, thank you for your time. Jay Secular.
As for calls that he stepped down, he says not yet.
There's some things that I want to do, some things I want to get done that I've discussed with the president. And once I have finished that, I'll sit down with him and we'll determine when it's time to make a transition to a new Attorney General.
But to be clear, you're not stepping down now.
No, I have no intention of doing so now. There's some things that I want to do, some things I want to get done that I've discussed with the president.
One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
His name is Eric Holder, and you probably heard of him before. In 1993, President Bill Clinton nominated him for a spot as a U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. 4 years later, he was appointed Clinton's Deputy Attorney General. But his reputation will forever be tarnished for his role in the last-minute Clinton pardons, including that of billionaire Mark Rich. While every president hands out pardons, this one reeked of smoke-filled backroom politics. Guess who was in charge of reviewing the Clinton pardons? You got it, Eric Holder. The pardons sparked outrage across the country. In New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office was infuriated because they were not consulted about the pardon, which is pro forma Justice Department policy. Mayor Rudy Giuliani was the U.S. Attorney who prosecuted Mark Rich.
The pardon of Mark Rich is an outrage. I mean, there's no conceivable explanation of it that I can think of that has anything to do with decent law enforcement.
He refused to take the petition for the pardon of Mark Rich, and he should have done that. He was the man in charge at that point, and he should have distributed that to the people in the Justice Department that was involved intimately in the pardon process, and he didn't do that.
So what did Holder have to say for himself? Well, he blamed his lack of judgment on his busy schedule.
There are things I wish I could have done differently on that night, but I want people to try to understand that this was not the only thing on my plate on that evening, and it was not one of the chief things that I had on my plate.
7 years later, Eric Holder will find himself under fire in Congress once again. The questions about the Rich pardon still persist. Did Holder give it tacit support because of his own agenda, or perhaps someone else's? And if Holder's to be taken at his word, is simply being too busy an acceptable excuse for not properly vetting one of the most controversial pardons in American history? Also, what does Eric Holder have to say about his role in the Elian Gonzalez case?
Isn't it clear in that Court of Appeals ruling, preliminary though it may be, that the court ruled that the INS may not do exactly what it did this morning, which is, without a court order, change the guardian of this child? When is the last time a child, was taken at the point of a gun without an order by a judge? Unprecedented in American history.
He was not taken at the point of a gun.
We have a photograph showing that he was taken at the point of a gun.
They were armed agents who went in there and acted very sensitively.
I don't know if you can see our screen, but the gun is pointing at the boy. The agent is grabbing the boy. There's no court order that says that this can be done. There's no precedent in American history for transferring custody at the point of a gun without an order of a judge. Instead of using authoritarian jackboot tactics like putting the muzzle of a gun in the face of a 6-year-old boy.
Now, you're referring to jackboot tactics by good American law enforcement agents.
About a week of fighting with the federal government to have his body released. We found out later that during that time period, the federal government had made 2 attempts to have his body cremated. The family still lived. When I arrived, he had been beaten head to toe. His skull was split in 3 places. His throat had been cut. Even the soles of his feet had been beaten. And the government said it was a suicidal hanging. And what we never had was a motive for his death. People would say to you, why would the federal government torture, and he was tortured, and murder your brother? And we had no explanation for that. Another thing about the case that was always unexplainable was the fact that so much evidence disappeared. My brother was supposedly found with blood-stained clothing, but when his body was turned over to the medical examiner 2 hours later, his clothes were gone. He was wearing nothing but boxer shorts. The video camera, supposedly that would monitor access to my brother, malfunctioned. The logbooks that would have shown who came and went from the institution with access to my brother either disappeared, or the pages on the date my brother was there, dates my brother was there, were torn out. The crime scene photographs disappeared. The medical examiner is not allowed access to the death scene. When he finally is allowed access to the death scene 4 months later, it had been painted and cleaned up. And this is all done by the FBI and the Department of Justice, and we could never understand why.
Well, tell us more about that. That's another extremely important part of this case that we haven't even really touched on yet. But tell us about Eric Holder and what was he coordinating there, and who was he corresponding with?
He was with the key leaders in the Senate to keep the Senate from holding hearings into my brother's murder and the disappearance of all the evidence, the perjury. The Inspector General of the United States did an investigation of my brother's death, would seal the report. It's my understanding that it's the only Inspector General's report not involving national security that's ever been sealed. And you say, you investigate Inspector General of the United States. One, to investigate an inmate's death is incredible. But then to seal that report, and the objective was to keep Congress from holding hearings. And so Holder was the Hill. He dealt with Hatch. He dealt with Senator Dorgan, Democrat, Republican, high up in their respective parties. It was to kill any judiciary inquiry, Senate Judiciary Committee inquiry into my brother's death. And he did. These emails, they talk about his contacts with Dorgan, his contacts with Hatch. It says the Hill takes precedent over everything. We've got to get out to them first. We've got to keep basically the trade mission. Our rollout plan is to get there first and kill this.
Absolutely.
The thing your audience has to understand, it's not me making this up. These come out of government documents. Everything I've told you is out of a government document. I didn't pull it out of my rear end.
You certainly didn't, and again, for those people who might not have been paying attention, we're talking about Eric Holder, the current Attorney General of the United States, and it's absolutely just incredible to think that this was going on in the case of, as you say, an inmate's death, which under normal circumstances would not be receiving this type of attention.
Would never.
I think it's very likely he was murdered. I'm not able to prove it. I have temporarily classified the death as undetermined. And you try to gain access to the scene, and the government of the United States says, no, you can't. And you try to gain access to the scene, and the government of the United States says, no, you can't. They continued to prohibit us from having access to the scene of his death, which is unheard of in 1997. So there are questions about the death of Kenneth Trentadue that will never be answered because of the actions of the United States government. Whether those actions were intentional or whether they were through incompetence, I don't know. And it's not easy to communicate with the federal government. It was botched, or worse, it was planned.
I met with the Deputy Attorney General just last night on this.
And you've seen the pictures and the information of the case. How could there be no federal crime wrongdoing in the death of Trent?
Well, it wasn't just pictures. It was the finding of blood, the inconsistencies with regard to the death, the way the matter was covered up, really.
In December, you told Attorney General Janet Reno that it looked like this was murder. Do you still believe that Trentadue was murdered?
Well, I don't know that I ever went that far, but it certainly looks terrible. And it certainly makes one wonder whether or not a murder was committed or a manslaughter. It certainly has a lot of elements of questionability. And if you look at all the facts, the body, they tried to cremate the body before anybody could see that that body was bruised and battered. The blood that was found, the lack of following procedures, I mean, just go on and on. There's a lot wrong with this case, and I hope somebody will get to the bottom of it, but apparently the federal government hasn't been able to do so. I was disappointed in these findings. There are just too many unexplained facts, too much brutality apparently done, and frankly no answers. And I can't understand that.
Or does it have the aroma of cover-up?
Yep, it has the aroma of cover-up, this particular problem.
What about as far as the former inmates who have come forward in the case and now say that their lives are being threatened, and one has even been sent back into the federal system because he traveled across lines from Arkansas to Oklahoma to tell his story to the Oklahoma County DA, Bob Macy, what he saw the night Trentadue died. He said that he saw an officer cleaning bloody batons the night that Trentadue died. Your comments on that?
Don't know much about that. Haven't been into that, but that's serious stuff. And like I say, it does look bad. Somebody has not told the truth here, and somebody is in my opinion, covering up.
I did not know. I don't know what happened to this man. I did not know. I don't know. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't know. I assume he was, but I don't know. And I don't know what you all are going to ask. I did not know.